The transport ship landed on Prime just after sunrise. Captain Park stepped out onto the platform and looked at the massive building in front of her. The Galactic Defense Academy stood like a mountain of glass and metal. Ships flew overhead carrying cadets from a dozen different worlds. Carried only one small bag. Inside were her uniforms, her tablet, and a data chip containing her teaching materials. She had spent 15 years fighting in deep space. Now she would teach others how to fight. A tall, insect-like creature waited at the entrance. His exoskeleton was dark blue with silver markings. This was Commander Tan, her assigned mentor. He clicked his mandibles together in what might have been a greeting. "Captain Park," he said. His voice came through a translator device. "Welcome to the Academy. I am Commander Tan of the Defense Corps. I will help you adjust to your new position." "Thank you, Commander," said. She kept her voice calm and professional. Tan led her through the corridors. Other instructors stared as they passed. Some were reptilian with scales that changed color. Others were amphibious with wet skin and large eyes. A few were tall, thin beings she did not recognize. All of them stopped to watch the human walk by. "You are the first human instructor in our 800-year history," Tan explained. "Many here are curious about your appointment." "Curious," repeated. "That's a polite word for it." Tan's mandibles clicked again. It might have been laughter. "You are correct. Many are skeptical. Humans joined the coalition only 15 years ago. Most species here have been members for centuries. They wonder if humans are ready to teach." He showed her to a small office with a window overlooking the training grounds. Below, cadets practiced combat maneuvers in formation. They moved with precision and discipline. "You will teach advanced combat theory to senior cadets," Tan continued. "These students are the best from their worlds. They are preparing for their final qualification exam. The exam is called the Crucible. It is very difficult." "How difficult?" asked. 40% fail, Tan said quietly. "The Crucible is a combat simulation, but it feels real. The cadets command holographic soldiers. If they make mistakes, those soldiers die. The cadets watch their people die because of their decisions. Many cannot handle this. Some instructors resign because they cannot watch their students fail." Set her bag down and looked out the window. "I've watched real people die because of my decisions, Commander. I think I can handle a simulation." Tan was silent for a moment. "Yes, I have read your file, 14 deployments, 3 major battles, the defensive station. You have experience that few can claim." "Then why are people skeptical?" asked. "Because humans are young. Your tactics are strange. You fight without honor codes. You use deception and trickery. These things make the coalition uncomfortable." Smiled slightly. "Good. Comfortable soldiers are dead soldiers." Her first class was scheduled for that afternoon. Tan brought her to the lecture hall early. The room was large with curved seating that rose up like an amphitheater. At the front was a holographic projector system. The cadets arrived in groups. They wore uniforms in different colors based on their species. They talked and laughed until they saw standing at the front. Then the room went quiet. 23 cadets took their seats, counted 3 humans among them. One was a young woman with short black hair who sat in the back row. The girl looked nervous. A large cadet sat in the front. His scales were deep red with black patterns. He stared at with obvious contempt. Other cadets whispered to each other and glanced at her. Waited until everyone was seated. Then she spoke. "My name is Captain Park. I will be teaching advanced combat theory for the remainder of this term. I have 14 deployments in combat zones across 3 sectors. I have commanded ships, ground forces, and special operations teams. I am here to prepare you for the Crucible exam and for real warfare." The Red raised his hand. "Captain Park, may I ask a question?" "Go ahead." "What actual combat experience do you have?" His voice was challenging. "Humans have only been in the coalition for 15 years. Most of that time was peaceful. What real battles have you fought? The room waited for her answer. Walked closer to the seat. What's your name, Cadet? Ho of the Dominion. Cadet Ho, I fought in the Frontier Wars. I defended station against a pirate fleet of 38 ships with only 1 destroyer and 2 frigates. I conducted raids on smuggler bases in the Outer Rim. I tracked and eliminated a terrorist cell that killed 2,000 civilians on Europa Station. I have fired weapons in anger more times than I can count. Is that enough experience for you? Ho's scales darkened slightly. The Frontier Wars were minor conflicts, small pirate groups and criminals, not real military operations. I see, said. And how many real military operations have you fought in, Cadet? Ho had no answer. That's what I thought, continued. None of you have fought in real battles. You've trained in simulations. You've studied theory. But you haven't watched your friends die or made decisions that cost lives. That's why you're here, to learn before you have to do it for real. She returned to the front of the room. Let me be clear about something. I don't care what species you are. I don't care about your family's honor or your world's military traditions. I care about one thing only. Can you keep your people alive while completing the mission? If you can do that, you pass my class. If you can't, you fail. Simple as that. A small cadet raised a claw. Instructor Park, what will you teach us that is different from our other instructors? I will teach you how humans fight, said. We are weaker than, we are slower than, we cannot process tactical data as fast as. But humans survived on a death world for 200,000 years. We learned to survive by being smarter, more creative, and more ruthless than anything trying to kill us. Those lessons work in space combat too. Ho spoke again. Are you saying human tactics are superior to coalition doctrine? I'm saying human tactics are different, replied. Coalition doctrine emphasizes honor, clear rules of engagement, and traditional formations. Human tactics emphasize winning. Sometimes winning requires dishonor. Sometimes it requires breaking the rules. Are you willing to learn that? The room was very quiet now. I will teach you things that will make your other instructors uncomfortable, continued. I will show you battles where smaller forces defeated larger ones through deception and psychology. I will teach you that the enemy's mind is more important than their ships. Some of you will hate what I teach. Some of you will embrace it. Either way, you will be better officers for learning it. She activated the holographic projector. An image appeared showing an ancient battle on Earth. Small groups of soldiers were defeating a much larger army using terrain and ambush tactics. This is the Battle of Thermopylae, said. 300 soldiers held off an army of thousands. They didn't win through honor. They won through choosing the right position and making the enemy come to them. Tomorrow we will discuss how this applies to space combat. The class ended. The cadets filed out slowly. Many looked confused. Ho looked angry. The young human woman in the back waited until everyone else left, then approached. Captain Park, the girl said, I'm one of the 3 humans in this class. I noticed, said, what can I do for you, cadet? I just wanted to say thank you. The other cadets don't take us seriously. They think humans are weak. It's good to have a human instructor. Studied the young woman. Don't thank me yet. I'm going to push you harder than I push anyone else. You want them to respect humans. You'll earn it through excellence, not through me being easy on you. Straightened. Yes, ma'am, I understand. Good, now go study. We have a lot of work to do. As left, Commander Tan entered the room. That was an interesting first class, he said. Cadet Ho looked very unhappy. He'll get over it, said. Perhaps, or perhaps he will cause trouble. Ho is the top student in this class. His family is very powerful in the Dominion. He is not used to being challenged. Smiled. Then it's time he learned. The universe doesn't care about his family's power when someone is shooting at him. Tan's mandibles clicked. You may be right, Captain Park, but be careful. The Academy has traditions. Many here do not like change. Then they're going to hate the next few weeks, said. She looked out at the training grounds where cadets were still practicing. They moved in perfect formation, following doctrine that was centuries old. Knew she was about to turn their world upside down. And she was looking forward to it. The next morning, arrived at the simulation lab before dawn. She wanted to review the training scenarios that other instructors had used. What she found made her shake her head. Every scenario followed the same pattern. Two fleets meet in open space. They exchange fire according to established rules. The side with more ships or better positioning wins. It was predictable, it was boring, and it had nothing to do with real combat. Deleted all of them and created her own scenarios. When the cadets arrived for their first practical exercise, they found the simulation room arranged differently. Instead of the usual command stations facing forward, the seats formed a circle. In the center was a holographic display showing a star system. "Take your seats," said. "Today we begin practical exercises. You will work in teams to solve tactical problems." Ho raised his hand. "Instructor, where are the command stations? How will we control the simulation?" "You won't," said. "Not today. Today you will observe. I will show you battles from Earth's history. You will learn how humans fight." She activated the display. It showed a jungle terrain with a river running through it. Small groups of human soldiers moved through the trees. A much larger force approached on the open ground near the river. "This is Vietnam, a war on Earth 200 years ago," explained. "The large force belongs to a powerful nation with advanced weapons. The small groups are local fighters with basic equipment. Who do you think will win?" "The larger force, obviously," said Wu, a cadet. "They have more soldiers and better weapons." "Watch," said. The simulation played forward. The large force moved confidently through the jungle. Then suddenly soldiers started falling. They were being shot from hidden positions in the trees. The large force couldn't see their attackers. They fired wildly at shadows. More soldiers fell. The survivors retreated in panic. "The small force," one said. "They used terrain, surprise, and knowledge of the environment. They didn't fight honorably in open battle. They hit and ran. They attacked from hiding. They made the enemy afraid." And Cadet raised his hand. "But that's not honorable combat. Those are terrorist tactics." "They're survival tactics," corrected. "When you're weaker than your enemy, you don't fight fair. You fight smart. Honor doesn't matter if you're dead." Ho stood up. His scales had turned bright red with anger. "This is wrong. The coalition has rules of engagement. We fight with honor. We don't hide in ambush. We face our enemies directly." "Sit down, Cadet," said calmly, "and tell me something. If an enemy fleet attacks your home world, will you wait for them to face you honorably? Or will you use every advantage to protect your people?" "I would fight with honor," Ho insisted. "Anything else is cowardice." "Then you would lose," said, "and your people would die." Next scenario. The display changed. It showed a frozen landscape with mountains. A small army in white uniforms was fighting a much larger army in dark uniforms. The battle was clearly going badly for the larger force. "This is the Winter War," said. "A small nation fighting a massive empire. The small nation should have been crushed in weeks. Instead, they held out for months. How?" She zoomed in on the battlefield. The soldiers in white moved on skis through the snow. They appeared suddenly from the trees, destroyed enemy vehicles, and disappeared before the enemy could respond. They used the cold as a weapon. They cut supply lines. They made the larger army afraid of the forest. They used their environment, explained. They knew the terrain. They wore white uniforms in the snow. They moved fast on skis. The enemy wore dark uniforms and couldn't move through deep snow. The enemy was scared of forests because attacks came from everywhere. Fear is a weapon. Was taking notes rapidly. Several other cadets looked interested, but Ho and some of the traditional students looked disgusted. These tactics violate the Coalition's code of honor, said a female named Bin. We have rules about ambushes and surprise attacks. They must be announced first so the enemy can prepare. That's the rule I've ever heard, said bluntly. You announce your ambush, then it's not an ambush. Who made these rules? The Coalition founders created them 300 years ago, Bin said stiffly. They ensure civilized warfare. There's no such thing as civilized warfare, replied. War is violence. The point is to win as quickly as possible with the least cost to your own people. If you can win without fighting at all, even better. She brought up another scenario. This time it showed a naval battle on Earth's oceans. Small boats loaded with explosives were attacking a much larger warship. Asymmetric warfare, said. When you can't match the enemy's strength, you change the rules. You find their weakness. Every large system has weaknesses. For the next 2 hours, showed them battle after battle. Vikings using dragon ships for fast raids. Mongols using false retreats to lure enemies into traps. British submarines destroying German supply ships. In every case, the weaker force won through creativity and ruthlessness. By the end of class, the cadets were divided. Half of them looked fascinated. The other half looked deeply uncomfortable. After class, Commander Tan approached in her office. The other instructors are complaining, he said. They say you are teaching dishonor and deception. They say you are corrupting the students. I'm teaching them reality, said. Coalition doctrine might work fine against other coalition forces who follow the same rules. But what happens when they face an enemy who doesn't care about honor? Pirates don't announce ambushes. Terrorists don't fight in open space. Your doctrine will get them killed. Perhaps, Tan said, but you must understand the Coalition's rules exist for a reason. Centuries ago, wars between species were brutal. Entire worlds were destroyed. The rules were created to prevent that. I understand, said, but rules don't stop enemies who don't follow them. My students need to know how to fight dirty when they have to. The next day gave them their first practical simulation. Each cadet was placed in command of a small fleet. Their mission was to defend a mining station from raiders. The raiders outnumbered them 3-1. Most cadets followed standard doctrine. They formed defensive lines around the station. They engaged the raiders directly. All of them lost. The raiders destroyed the station and most of their ships. Then it was turn. The human cadet studied the scenario for several minutes before acting. Instead of defending the station directly, she ordered her ships to retreat. The raiders thought they had won and moved in to loot the station. Had left the station's reactors set to overload. When the raiders got close, the station exploded. The blast destroyed half the raider fleet. Ships then swept in and destroyed the survivors. Interesting solution, said, but you sacrificed the station. The station was going to be destroyed anyway, replied. This way I saved my ships and destroyed the enemy completely. They won't raid anyone else. Correct, you used their greed as a weapon. Good thinking. Ho was furious. She destroyed her own station. That's not defense, that's sabotage. It's effective, countered. Better to deny the enemy a prize than let them have it. Scorched earth tactics have been used for thousands of years. It's cowardly, Ho insisted. No, it's smart, said. Cadet, your strategy saved your fleet and eliminated the threat. Well done. Over the next 2 weeks, continued teaching unconventional tactics. She taught them about psychological warfare, spreading false information to make enemies doubt their intelligence. She taught them about feints and false retreats, making the enemy think they were winning until they walked into a trap. She taught them about targeting enemy morale instead of just destroying ships. Some students thrived under her teaching, excelled at creative solutions, learned to combine his careful planning with human unpredictability. Even Wu started thinking beyond standard doctrine. But others resisted. Ho and several traditional students complained constantly. They said human tactics were dishonorable. They argued that winning without honor was meaningless. Then came the day, assigned the impossible scenario. "This is your assignment for next week," she announced. "Defend a civilian colony from an enemy fleet. You have 6 ships, the enemy has 40. You cannot retreat because there are 2 million civilians on the planet. Standard evacuation would take 3 days. The enemy will arrive in 6 hours. Find a solution." The cadets stared at her in shock. "That's impossible," said. "No one can win with those odds." "Then don't win," said. "Save the civilians, that's the mission." "Every previous solution in the archives results in massive casualties," Wu protested. "Either the military forces are destroyed or most of the civilians die." "Then find a new solution," said. "You have 1 week, class dismissed." The cadets left looking worried, all except who stayed behind. "Instructor Park," she said, "I think I have an idea, but it's unusual." "Tell me," said. Explained her plan. As she talked, smiled. It was devious, unconventional, and completely brilliant. It was also going to cause a huge controversy. "Do it," said. "Present your solution next week." 1 week later, stood in front of the class and explained her strategy. She would fake a disease outbreak on the colony. She would transmit false intelligence, suggesting the colony had no strategic value. She would use civilian mining charges as improvised weapons in an asteroid field. She would lead the enemy into the trap using her own ships as bait. The class erupted in protest. "You can't use civilians as part of a military strategy," Binge shouted. "You're lying to the enemy about a disease outbreak," another cadet protested. "This violates every rule of honorable combat," Ho roared. Waited for the noise to die down, then she spoke quietly. "This plan saves 95% of the civilians. It preserves 80% of your military forces. Every other solution presented this week results in either total military defeat or massive civilian casualties. Her plan works. That's all that matters." "But it's dishonorable," Ho insisted. "It's effective," said coldly. "In war, you use what you have. Used information warfare, environmental advantages, and creative thinking. That's exactly what I've been teaching you." Ho stood up. His scales were bright red. "I formally challenge your competence as an instructor. Your teaching methods violate coalition standards. I am requesting an academy board review." Other traditional students stood with him. Within an hour, a formal petition had been filed. The hearing was scheduled for the day before the final exam. That evening, found sitting alone in her office. "I'm sorry," said. "I caused trouble for you." "You did well," replied. "You thought like a human, that's what I wanted." "But what if they remove you as instructor?" Smiled. "Then I'll have proven my point. They're not ready for human thinking, but I don't think they'll remove me." "Why not?" "Because deep down they know I'm right. They're just scared to admit it." The Academy Board hearing room was larger than expected. Rows of seats rose up like stairs on both sides. At the front sat 5 senior officers representing the different species of the coalition. In the center was Commandant N, the elderly who ran the academy. Stood alone at a podium facing the board. Behind her, the room was filled with instructors and senior cadets who had come to watch. She could feel their eyes on her back. Ho sat in the front row with 6 other cadets who had signed the petition. They all wore formal uniforms. They looked confident. Commandant N called the hearing to order. His voice was quiet but carried through the room. "We are here to review the teaching methods of Captain Park," he said. "Cadet Ho has filed a formal complaint. He claims that Captain Park's methods violate coalition standards and corrupt students with dishonorable tactics. Cadet Ho, present your case." Ho stood and walked to the other podium. He carried a data pad with prepared notes. "Honored Commandant, honored board members," he began. "I bring this complaint with regret but also with conviction. Captain Park has spent the last 3 weeks teaching us tactics that go against everything the Coalition stands for. He activated a holographic display showing clips from classes. She teaches ambush without warning. She teaches deception and lying to enemies. She teaches us to use civilians as part of military operations. She shows us battles where honor was abandoned in favor of victory at any cost. Ho's voice grew stronger. The Coalition was built on the principle that warfare should be civilized. We have rules to prevent the atrocities of the past. Captain Park treats these rules with contempt. She tells us that honor doesn't matter. She says that any tactic is acceptable if it achieves victory. He paused for effect. If we follow her teaching, we become no better than pirates and terrorists. We abandon what makes the Coalition great. I ask the board to remove Captain Park from her teaching position before she corrupts an entire generation of officers. Ho sat down. Several instructors nodded in agreement. The board members looked serious. Commandant in turn 2, Captain Park, you may respond. Stepped forward, she had no notes. She had known this was coming. Cadet Ho is correct, she said. I do teach ambush tactics. I do teach deception. I do teach strategies that your rules call dishonorable. And I would do it again because one day these cadets will face an enemy who doesn't care about your rules. She looked directly at the board. The Coalition has been at peace for 30 years. You've had small conflicts with pirates and raiders, but no real wars. Your rules work fine when everyone follows them. But what happens when you meet an enemy who doesn't? One of the board members, an admiral named Bora, spoke up. The Coalition's strength is in our unity and our honor. We do not need to fight like savages to win. Admiral Bora, with respect, you're wrong, said. I've read reports of Coalition engagements with pirate fleets. Your casualty rates are 3 times higher than they should be. You lose ships and soldiers because you fight predictably. You announce your movements. You engage in open combat where the enemy expects you. You're getting people killed because you value honor over effectiveness. Another board member, a colonel named Wei, clicked his mandibles. Are you saying Coalition doctrine is flawed? I'm saying it's incomplete, replied. Your doctrine works well against opponents who follow the same rules, but it has no flexibility. You train officers to follow procedures, not to think creatively. When they face something unexpected, they don't know how to adapt. And your human tactics provide this flexibility, Admiral Bora asked skeptically. They do, said. Humans survived on a world that was constantly trying to kill us. We didn't survive through strength or speed. We survived through creativity, adaptability, and yes, sometimes ruthlessness. Those skills translate to military operations. Commandant and leaned forward. Captain Park, you mentioned reports of Coalition engagements. How did you access those classified files? I requested them from the Defense Ministry, said. I told them I needed to understand Coalition combat performance to teach effectively. They granted me access. And what did you find? Anne asked. Pulled up her own data display. In the last 10 years, the Coalition has engaged pirate and raider forces 47 times. You won 39 of those engagements, but your casualty rate averaged 23%. That's unacceptable. She highlighted several specific battles. In this engagement, a Coalition patrol encountered raiders near an asteroid belt. The Coalition commander engaged them in open space according to doctrine. The raiders retreated into the asteroids. The Coalition commander followed and lost 2 ships to ambush. If that commander had used the asteroids himself, set a trap, he would have won with 0 casualties. Another battle appeared. Here, a Coalition fleet defending a supply station waited for the enemy to attack their defensive position. The enemy simply bypassed them and hit the supply convoys instead. The Coalition fleet couldn't respond quickly because they were committed to the defensive position. Standard doctrine says defend fixed positions, but the mission was to protect supplies, not defend a station. The commander failed because he followed doctrine instead of thinking about the actual objective. The board members looked uncomfortable, pressed on. I'm not criticizing these commanders. They did what they were trained to do, but their training is limited. They need to learn flexibility. They need to learn that honor is important, but completing the mission and protecting your people is more important. Admiral Bora stood up. You speak boldly for someone with so little experience. Humans have been in space for barely 50 years. What makes you think you can teach species that have been fighting wars for? Because I've actually done it, said quietly. I've commanded forces in real combat. How many of the instructors in this academy have done that? The room went very quiet. I have, said a voice from the back. An old instructor stood up. I fought in the border wars 40 years ago, and I must say Captain Park's analysis is correct. We lost many good soldiers because we were too rigid in our tactics. Another instructor also stood. I commanded a patrol that engaged pirates last year. We followed doctrine and lost a frigate. If I had been more creative, I might have saved those lives. More instructors began to speak up, sharing stories of times when following doctrine had led to unnecessary casualties. Commandant raised his hand for silence. Thank you. However, we are not here to debate coalition doctrine. We are here to determine if Captain Park's teaching methods are appropriate for this academy. He looked at Captain Park. Cadet Ho claims you show contempt for the coalition's values. How do you respond? I don't show contempt, said. I show realism. Yes, I believe some of your rules are foolish. Announcing ambushes makes no sense. Engaging only in open combat gives away advantages, but I understand why those rules exist. You created them to prevent atrocities. That's admirable. She paused. But rules should serve survival, not replace it. I teach my students to complete their missions and bring their people home alive. If that sometimes requires bending rules, then I'll teach them when and how to bend those rules. Because a dead officer with perfect honor has still failed his crew. Ho jumped to his feet. This is exactly what I mean. She admits she teaches breaking the rules. Sit down, cadet, and said firmly. Ho sat and looked at the other board members. They were having a quiet conversation. Then he turned back to Captain Park. The board will deliberate. However, before we do, I think there is something the room should know. I took the liberty of requesting your full military record from Earth Defense Command. It arrived this morning. With your permission, I would like to share it. His expression didn't change. Permission granted, Commandant. And activated a large display. The room went very quiet as they read. Captain Park, 14 deployments across multiple conflict zones, decorated for valor 3 times, commanded special operations teams in high-risk missions, and then the record showed the Battle of Station. For those who don't know, and said, Station was a critical human outpost near Coalition space. 5 years ago, a pirate armada of 38 ships attacked it. Captain Park commanded the defense with only 3 ships, 1 destroyer and 2 frigates. The display showed the battle statistics. The odds were overwhelming. Everyone in the room knew what should have happened. The station should have fallen. Captain Park employed psychological warfare, false communications, and strategic retreats, and continued. She made the enemy fleet believe they were facing a much larger force. She transmitted fake distress signals from multiple locations. She used civilian ships' transponders to create phantom contacts. She led enemy squadrons into friendly fire situations. The display showed the final result. The enemy fleet destroyed itself through confusion and panic. Station survived with 0 military casualties. This operation, and said, is now studied in Earth's military academies as an example of perfect defensive strategy. Captain Park defeated an enemy that outnumbered her 12-1 without losing a single ship. The room was completely silent now. She did this through tactics that violated every coalition rule, and continued. She lied to the enemy. She used civilian assets. She made them destroy each other through deception, and she saved thousands of lives by doing so. He looked at Ho. Cadet, you said Captain Park teaches dishonor. I say she teaches survival. You said she corrupts students. I say she gives them tools they need. And turned to the board. I vote that Captain Park continue as instructor. Her methods may be unconventional, but they are effective, and effectiveness is what will keep our officers alive. The other board members voted. It was unanimous. Captain Park would continue teaching. As the room cleared, Ho approached. His scales were dark with shame. I was wrong about you, he said quietly. I still don't agree with all your methods, but I understand now that you have real experience. I spoke without full knowledge. That was dishonorable of me. Apology accepted, said. And for what it's worth, questioning authority takes courage. Just make sure you have all the facts first. That evening, sat in her office with Commander Tan. You made an impression, he said. The instructors are talking. Some want to learn your methods. Others are still resistant. Let them resist, said. My job is to teach the students, not convert the faculty. The final exam is in 3 weeks, Tan reminded her. The Crucible, are your students ready? Thought about creative solutions, about how even traditional students like Ho were starting to think differently, about the way they questioned standard responses now. They're ready, she said, or they will be. The evening before the final exam was quiet. Most cadets were in their quarters reviewing materials or trying to sleep. Some walked the academy grounds, too nervous to rest. The Crucible exam would begin at dawn. Had called a special class session for 8 o'clock that evening. It was optional, but every single cadet showed up. They filled the lecture hall and sat in silence, waiting. Stood at the front of the room. She looked at each of her 23 students. In 3 weeks they had changed. They sat differently now. They looked more alert, more ready to question, more alive. Tomorrow you take the Crucible exam, she began. It will be the hardest test of your lives, not because the tactical problems are impossible, not because the enemy forces are overwhelming, but because you will watch people die because of your decisions. She walked between the rows of seats. The simulations use advanced AI. The soldiers you command will act like real people. They will follow your orders. They will panic when things go wrong. They will die if you make mistakes, and you will see every death. Some cadets looked nervous. Others tried to appear confident, was taking notes even now. Every year, cadets fail this exam, continued. Some freeze when the pressure becomes too much. Some follow doctrine too rigidly and can't adapt when the situation changes. Some make bold decisions without thinking through the consequences. And some just aren't ready to carry the weight of command. She returned to the front. I've taught you tactics that make the other instructors uncomfortable. I've shown you that sometimes the right decision looks wrong on paper. I've pushed you to think beyond what you were taught before you came to my class. Ho raised his hand. Instructor Park, what advice do you have for tomorrow? Smiled slightly. Trust yourself. You know more than you think you do. Every situation you face will be different, but the principles remain the same. Understand your objective. Know your resources. Think about what the enemy expects and do something else. And most importantly, remember that your mission is to complete the objective and bring your people home alive. Nothing else matters. Wu spoke up. What if we face a scenario where we can't save everyone? What if we have to choose between completing the mission and saving lives? Then you make the hard choice, said. That's what command means. You'll face situations where every option is bad. You pick the least bad option and live with the consequences. That's the job. The room was very quiet. Walked to her desk and picked up her tablet. She stood looking at it for a long moment. Then she looked back at her students. I want to offer you something, she said. But first I need to explain how the Crucible works. She brought up a display showing the exam structure. Tomorrow, you'll each enter an isolated command sphere. You'll be alone. You can't communicate with anyone. For 6 hours, you'll face multiple scenarios that get progressively harder. The AI will respond realistically to your decisions. The exam measures your strategic thinking, your tactical execution, and your ability to handle stress. She zoomed in on a diagram of the observation room. While you're in the command sphere, all the instructors will be in the observation room. We'll watch your simulations on multiple screens. We can see everything you're doing. We can see your mistakes before you make them. But we cannot help you. Academy regulations are very clear. Any instructor who assists a cadet during the exam will be expelled from the academy. The cadet will fail immediately and be barred from retaking the exam. Several cadets nodded. They knew these rules. The exam has a 40% failure rate, continued. Every year, I'm told, instructors sit in that observation room and watch their students make terrible mistakes. They watch cadets walk into obvious traps. They watch them execute flawed strategies. They watch simulated soldiers die by the thousands because a cadet didn't see something obvious, and the instructors can't say a word. She paused. Some instructors resign after the exam. They can't handle watching their students fail when they could have prevented it with one warning. Asked, "Why are you telling us this?" "Because," said, "I want to give you a choice. I can help you prepare for tomorrow, or I can help you during tomorrow, but I can't do both." The cadets looked confused, explained. Option 1 is simple. I have notes, tactical frameworks, decision trees, analysis patterns. Everything I would use if I were taking the exam. I can give you these notes tonight. You'll study them. You'll go into that exam with the best preparation possible. You'll probably pass. Some of you might even excel. This is completely within academy regulations. It's just advanced test preparation. She set the tablet down on her desk. Option 2 is different. Tomorrow, I sit in the observation room and watch your simulations. Every time you're about to make a critical mistake, I tell you. I watch your tactics and warn you before you commit to a bad strategy. I point out traps you don't see. I guide you through the scenarios like I'm sitting next to you. Several cadets sat up. But, said, her voice hard, Option 2 violates academy regulations. If I help you during the exam, even from the observation room, that's cheating. You'll all be expelled. I'll lose my commission. My career will be over. We'll all be disgraced. The room was completely silent now. So here's my question, said. She looked at each cadet again, meeting their eyes one by one. Do you want casualties or notes? No one spoke for several seconds, then raised her hand. I don't understand, instructor. Why would we choose casualties? Why would we risk everything for Option 2 when Option 1 is safe and legal? Because Option 2 guarantees minimal casualties, said. With me guiding you through the exam, you'll make almost no mistakes. Your simulated soldiers will survive. Your casualty rates will be the lowest in academy history, but you'll have cheated to achieve it. She walked to the center of the room. Option 1 means you go in alone. You rely on your training and your judgment. You'll make mistakes. Some of your simulated soldiers will die. You might even fail, but you'll do it honestly with your own skills. Ho stood up. Instructor Park, this is a trap. You're testing us. You want to see if we'll choose honor over easy victory. Maybe, said, or maybe I'm serious. Maybe I'm willing to sacrifice my career to make sure you all pass. You don't know, that's part of the choice. Ben spoke up. Even if you're serious, we couldn't accept. We'd be cheating. Everything we've earned would be meaningless. Would it? Asked. You'd still be skilled officers. You'd still have learned everything I taught you. The only difference is you'd have perfect guidance for 6 hours during one exam. But it would be dishonest, Wu said firmly. We couldn't live with ourselves. Smiled, then you're learning, good. She walked back to her desk. Here's what I really want you to understand. Tomorrow you'll be alone in that command sphere. No one can help you, no instructor, no book, no AI assistant, Just you and your judgment. It's going to be hard. You're going to doubt yourself. You're going to want someone to tell you what to do." She looked at them seriously. "But command is lonely. In real combat, you won't have anyone to guide you. You'll have to trust yourself. You'll have to make decisions without knowing if they're right, and you'll have to live with the consequences." "So my real question isn't about casualties or notes," continued. "My real question is this: do you trust yourself? Do you trust what I've taught you? Do you believe you can handle tomorrow on your own?" The cadets looked at each other. Then one by one they started to speak. "I trust my training," said. "I don't need help during the exam," added. "I'll rely on what I've learned," Wu said. Ho stood up again. His scales were their normal color now. "Instructor Park, I haven't always agreed with your methods, but you've taught us to think independently, to question doctrine when it doesn't fit the situation, to trust our judgment. It would be hypocritical to ask for guidance during the exam." Other cadets nodded in agreement. Felt a warmth in her chest, pride maybe, or satisfaction. "So none of you want the notes either. You're all going in completely on your own." "We have the best notes already," said. 3 weeks of your teaching, that's enough." "Plus," Ho added with something like humor, "if we fail after turning down your offer, we'll look like idiots." The room laughed. The tension broke. Picked up her tablet and deleted the file she had prepared. "Good. Then here's my actual advice for tomorrow. When you're in that command sphere and things start going wrong, and they will go wrong, remember 3 things." She held up one finger. "First, stay calm. Panic kills more soldiers than enemy fire. If you stay calm, you can think clearly. If you think clearly, you can adapt." A second finger. "Second, remember your objective. Not what doctrine says you should do, not what looks heroic. What actually needs to happen to complete the mission and save lives." A third finger. "Third, trust yourself. You've trained for this. You've learned tactics that work. You're ready. Believe that." She lowered her hand. "Now go get some rest. Tomorrow you prove what you've learned. And tomorrow night we celebrate because you're all going to pass." The cadets filed out slowly. Most looked more confident than when they arrived. Some stopped to think. A few looked nervous but determined. Was the last to leave. She paused at the door. "Instructor Park, that whole question about casualties or notes, was any of that real? Would you really have risked your career to help us?" Looked at the young woman. "What do you think?" "I think you knew we'd refuse. I think you were teaching us one last lesson about independence and trust." "Maybe," said. "Or maybe I was serious and you'll never know. Sometimes the best lessons come from questions that have no clear answer." Smiled and left. Alone in the lecture hall, sat down. Tomorrow would tell if she had prepared them well enough. Tomorrow would show if 3 weeks of unorthodox teaching could overcome centuries of rigid doctrine. She thought about her own first command exam years ago on Earth. She had been terrified. She had made mistakes, but she had trusted herself and passed. These cadets were ready. She knew it. Now they just needed to prove it to themselves. She turned off the lights and left the empty classroom. Tomorrow would be interesting. Dawn came early to prime. Arrived at the Crucible facility an hour before the exam started. The building was enormous, containing 24 isolated command spheres and a central observation room that looked like a mission control center. Other instructors were already there, preparing coffee and reviewing their students' profiles. They nodded to but kept their distance. She was still the outsider, the human who had turned their academy upside down. Commander Tan approached with 2 cups of tea. "Nervous?" he asked. "Always," admitted. "I've sent soldiers into combat. I've commanded ships in battle. But watching students take this exam feels different. If they fail, it's my failure too." "That's how every good instructor feels," Tan said. "But I've watched your students in the simulation labs. They're ready." The observation room filled with people. Besides the instructors, several members of the Academy board had come to watch. Commandant and sat in the center seat. He nodded too. At exactly dawn, the first cadets entered their command spheres. The spheres were sealed. Large screens in the observation room showed the inside of each sphere. Each cadet sat alone at a command console surrounded by holographic displays. The scenarios began. Cadet Wu went first. His scenario was straightforward: escort a convoy through contested space. Within minutes, enemy raiders appeared. Wu followed standard doctrine, forming a defensive screen around the convoy. The raiders probed his defenses, testing for weaknesses. Then Wu did something unexpected. He broke formation, charged one group of raiders aggressively, scattered them, then quickly returned to the convoy before other raiders could exploit the gap. It was risky but effective. The raiders, surprised by the aggressive move, decided the convoy wasn't worth the fight in. Interesting, one of the instructors muttered. That's not standard doctrine. But it worked, Tan pointed out. He showed initiative. Cadet Mira faced a colony defense scenario. She had limited forces and a surprise attack. Instead of trying to defend everything, she abandoned the outlying settlements and concentrated all her forces around the main population center. It was a hard choice. The simulated civilians in the outer settlements died, but the main population survived, and Mira's forces remained intact to counterattack. She sacrificed people, one instructor said, sounding troubled. She saved 80% of the population, countered. Trying to defend everything would have resulted in total defeat. Then entered her sphere, leaned forward slightly. Scenario was complex, a humanitarian crisis on a border world. Enemy forces were closing in. 2 million civilians needed evacuation, but there wasn't enough time. Her small fleet couldn't possibly fight off the enemy. Watched as studied the tactical display. The young cadet's face was calm, focused. She was thinking. Then started issuing orders. She had her ships broadcast emergency signals on all frequencies. Distress calls, mayday signals, fake communications about a catastrophic reactor failure on the planet. She used her ship's electronic warfare systems to create phantom contacts, making it look like a much larger fleet was in the system. The enemy fleet slowed, confused by the contradictory information. They had expected an easy raid, not a complex situation with potential hazards, kept feeding them false data. Reactor meltdown imminent, plague outbreak, quarantine warnings. The enemy commander, faced with unclear intelligence and potential dangers, decided to withdraw and wait for better information. By the time they figured out the deception, had evacuated the civilians. 0 casualties. The observation room went silent. Several instructors stared at the screen. She lied to them, someone said. She used psychological warfare, corrected. She made the enemy doubt their intelligence. They defeated themselves. Commandant smiled slightly, very creative. More cadets took their turns, faced a mutiny scenario, and used careful negotiation combined with tactical positioning to resolve it without bloodshed. Wu encountered a supply crisis and solved it through creative resource management. Even the traditional students showed improvement. Bin, who had always relied on by-the-book tactics, adapted when her standard approach failed. She didn't win perfectly, but she learned and adjusted mid-scenario. Then Cadet Ho entered the crucible. His scenario appeared on screen. It was brutal. Defend a mining outpost against a surprise attack by a splinter faction. The enemy had numerical superiority and the element of surprise. Had reviewed this scenario type. She knew exactly where the trap was. Ho's initial response was good. He organized his forces quickly and established defensive positions. His command presence was strong. The simulated soldiers responded well to his orders. But then saw him making a critical error. The enemy was withdrawing from one sector, creating what looked like an opening. Ho was positioning his forces to exploit it. He was preparing to attack. It was a trap, could see it clearly on the tactical display. The enemy had hidden reserves. If Ho committed to the attack, those reserves would flank him. He'd lose most of his fleet and fail the exam. The observation room saw it too. Instructors leaned forward. Someone whispered, "He's walking into an ambush." His hand moved toward her communicator. One message to his command sphere. One warning, she could save him. Commander Tan noticed her movement. "Captain Park, don't. Academy regulations." "I know," said quietly. Her hand hovered over the device. On screen, Ho was seconds away from giving the attack order. His forces were moving into position. The enemy reserves were hidden perfectly. This was the moment that would determine his future. Commandant spoke softly. "Captain Park, if you interfere, I will have to expel both you and Cadet Ho. Don't throw away your career." Looked at the screen. Ho's face showed concentration and confidence. He believed he saw an opportunity. He was about to take it. "I asked them a question last night," said, still staring at the screen. "They gave me their answer." She put her communicator down, without sending any message. The room held its breath. On screen, Ho's hand moved toward the attack command. Then he stopped. Ho's eyes narrowed. He zoomed in on the enemy withdrawal. He ran a probability analysis. He scanned for anomalies in the sensor data. He saw it. The pattern was too perfect. The withdrawal too convenient. His training in human deception tactics had taught him to question obvious opportunities. Instead of attacking, Ho sent a small scout force to the flank. The scouts detected the hidden enemy reserves. The trap was exposed. Ho's counter strategy was swift and brutal. He repositioned his forces to counter the ambush. When the enemy reserves revealed themselves, he was ready. His defensive fire devastated them. The enemy attack collapsed. The observation room erupted in excited conversation. Several instructors looked shocked. "He saw it," Tan said, sounding amazed. "He recognized the trap." "He learned," replied. She felt herself relax for the first time that morning. Ho's scenario continued. He faced additional challenges, but each time he adapted. He combined his traditional training with the human tactics had taught. He used honor when appropriate and deception when necessary. He completed his mission with minimal casualties. The remaining cadets took their exams. Not all performed perfectly. Cadet Bora lost a cruiser to friendly fire when she gave unclear orders under stress. Cadet Minho took too long to make decisions and lost civilians because he was afraid to act. But even the weaker performances showed signs of the new thinking had taught. By mid-afternoon, all 23 cadets had completed their exams. The instructors began calculating scores and casualty rates. The results would be posted within an hour. Stepped outside for fresh air. She found Ho waiting by the entrance. He looked exhausted but satisfied. "Instructor Park," he said, standing, "I wanted to thank you." "For what?" "For not helping me," Ho said. "I saw you in the observation room through the monitor feed. I saw you reach for your communicator when I was about to make the attack. You almost warned me." "But I didn't," said. "No, you didn't, and that was the right choice. If you had warned me, I wouldn't have learned to see the trap myself. I would have depended on you instead of trusting my training." He paused. "That was the real lesson, wasn't it? Your question last night wasn't about casualties or notes. It was about teaching us to trust ourselves." "Smart cadet," said with a slight smile. "You'll make a good officer." "Because I learned from a good instructor," Ho replied, "even if I was too stubborn to see it at first." The results were posted in the main hall. Cadets gathered nervously to see their scores. The traditional grading system used a point scale based on tactical execution, strategic thinking, and casualty rates. One by one, students found their names on the list. Had scored in the top 5 percentile. Her zero-casualty scenario using psychological warfare had impressed the evaluators. Several cadets achieved high scores. Even those who struggled had passed. Then the overall statistics appeared. Class had a 96% pass rate, the highest in 15 years. The average casualty rate across all her students was 43% lower than the academy average. The other instructors stared at the numbers. Some looked impressed, others looked troubled, a few looked angry. That evening there was a formal ceremony in the academy auditorium. Commandant and presented each passing cadet with their officer's commission. When he reached, he paused. Cadet, your performance in the Crucible was extraordinary. 0 casualties. Complete mission success. The evaluators have rated your exam as one of the best in Academy history. Congratulations, Lieutenant. The room applauded, looked like she might cry with happiness. When Ho received his commission and said, Cadet Ho, you demonstrated exceptional adaptability. You recognized a trap that has fooled many experienced officers. You combined traditional honor with creative thinking. Well done, Lieutenant Ho. After the ceremony and approached, they stood apart from the celebration. Your teaching methods work, he said simply. The statistics don't lie. Your students outperformed every other class. They learned to think, said, that's all I taught them. No, and disagreed. You taught them something harder. You taught them to question authority while still respecting it, to follow doctrine when appropriate but abandon it when necessary, to trust themselves even when they're uncertain. Those are rare skills. He was quiet for a moment. I've been commandant of this academy for 20 years. I've seen thousands of cadets pass through. Most become adequate officers. A few become excellent, but your students, they have something different, a flexibility that might be crucial in the years ahead. What do you mean? Asked. An's expression became serious. The coalition has been at peace for 30 years, but intelligence suggests that won't last. There are powers beyond our borders that don't share our values, powers that won't follow our rules. When we meet them, we'll need officers who can adapt, officers trained to think like your students think. He looked at her directly. The Academy Board wants you to stay, not just for one term. We want you to train instructors, to spread your methods throughout the Academy. We want the next generation of coalition officers to think like humans think. Was surprised. The other instructors won't like that. Many already support it and said, they saw your results. They understand that war is changing. Those who resist will adapt or retire. The coalition is not static. We learn. We evolve. That's our strength. I'll consider it, said. Later that night, sat alone in her office one last time. Through the window, she could see cadets celebrating. Her students were among them, talking excitedly about their new assignments. She thought about the question she had asked. Casualties or notes. It had been a test, but not the test they thought. She had never intended to help them during the exam. The real test was whether they would choose to rely on themselves. They had passed. A message appeared on her tablet. It was from Earth Defense Command. They wanted her back. New assignments, new battles, but found herself thinking about An's offer. Stay at the academy, train more officers, spread human tactics throughout the coalition. She looked at the celebrating cadets again. Lieutenant was laughing with Lieutenant Ho. Former enemies, now colleagues, both better officers because they had learned to think differently. Maybe she would stay. Maybe her war wasn't in space anymore. Maybe her war was here, teaching others to question, to adapt, to survive. She closed the message and started writing a response. Whatever she decided, she knew one thing for certain. The question she had asked would become legend. Years from now, cadets would tell the story of the human instructor who asked, "Do you want casualties or notes?" And the answer would always be the same. Neither, just teach us to think. And across the galaxy, whenever coalition officers faced impossible odds, they would remember. They would remember to question doctrine, to trust themselves, to think like humans think. Because that was what Park had taught them, not tactics, not strategies, but the most human skill of all. The ability to adapt and survive.